My early experience playing, there was a Sergeant Pepperoni's Pizza was the place that I would go to, and I remember I would play, it was the football game where you had to hit the trackball like this thing. I would just trash my hands on that thing, but it was that. It was Joust, which I loved. It was it Defender, and then when Dragon's Lair came, that was a real eye opener, boy. I mean, that was like, wow! Look at the graphics on this thing. So I mean, every Friday, Saturday, I would spend at the arcades dropping those quarters in the thing. And then of course I remember my Magnavox. I used to play that thing a lot. Not my Magnavox, but my Intellivision, and they had this weird controller. And I used to love Air Sea Battle, and there was this like cheat where you could get your little guy off the screen and like fire from the thing, But anyway, I used to get just massive blisters on my thumb from just twisting down on that thing all the time. I mean, it was a complete obsession when I was a kid. I was playing games constantly. If I go back to my first console, it was the Magnavox machine. I think it was called the Odyssey. And to show you how different things were there. I mean, basically it allowed you to play Pong, really. And so all you had was like one big white pixel you could move around the screen. And in order to have interesting graphics, they would give you these Mylar sheets that would stick to the screen with static electricity. And so like, then you'd put up like a haunted house, and then all of a sudden the white Pong ball would be like a ghost, moving through the house. I mean, that was where it really started, and that really was me being able to play Pong. The Atari came along, and I absorbed all that, and there was a great tank games and a lot of great product in, and that was sort of a big part of my childhood, was playing on the Atari VCS. But then the Apple II came along, and around that same time, the console business started to sort of drop off, and I became more obsessed with computers, especially with the Apple II. I could not just play it, but I could say, now I understand how they're made. Because when you're using a console, you don't really get to look kind of behind the curtain. So that went on for a long time. And then, of course, the Nintendo came along, and as a player, everybody thought, you got to be kidding me, we're past that, aren't we? And boom, here they come. And as usual, software sells hardware. And Mario Brothers was great, and Zelda was great. And so I put a lot of hours as a player into those early Nintendo games. I love those early Nintendo games. And then, of course, on comes the PlayStation and the Xbox, and Ridge Racer was kind of the big killer app there. And it got to, I remember the kind of one crossover point was, it used to be the arcades were the place you went for those kind of games. And all of a sudden, the consoles started to get, you started getting the same titles into the home. They didn't quite look as good, right, but you'd get a version of that, Virtua Racing or whatever it was, in your home. To me, that's kind of started the first nail in the coffin for the arcade. And then it became where, wait a second, now the consoles look as good as the arcade games do. And that really was kind of a big turning point. So I've owned almost every console machine along the way. And now, of course, they've become sort of representative of these 30, 40, $50 million tentpole AAA mega releases. And so to me, they're sort of breathtaking to watch how, as a player, watching how all this money they're being spent sort of unfolds on the screen. And I love the experience that they bring. I mean, I look at everything, when people talk about, will PlayStation 4 be successful? I don't know, show me a couple games that I have to have. I always look at it that way. It's like if I have a band that I love their music, and there's a format that I can only buy their music for, I might buy the format, and so it ultimately comes down to that. So the consoles of, from those early days of when the whole cartridge was, maybe 8K or something, to today, is just, again, it's breathtaking.
You're breathtaking.
There's a huge difference between our modern and what we want to call retro arcade gaming of the past. Remember, retro arcade gaming of the past was all about how quickly they could get quarters out of your pocket. That was the focus. So everything was designed around that. And I guess in ways you could almost compare that to free-to-play now. Those games are also made to focus on, here, it may be free, but we want to figure out how to get that money out of your pocket right now. For the kind of games that I make, and a lot of the industry products are not about that, but it's more about, you pay your one time, and now let's create an experience for you. Let's throw you into a world where you can escape and you're not being reminded of having to pay money or anything else along the way, but instead you're just totally wrapped up into that world. That's the kind of game I like to make, and that's very different than the kind of retro arcade games of the 70s. With my career, you know, some of the irony is when I first got into the business, it was very much the one and two man teams. Like there was like Dr. J and Larry Bird go one-on-one. That was a big game. A buddy of mine did that. It was one guy, you know. And so I wanted to have like a real company. So it was, you know, like to have a medical plan, have somebody answer the phones, have an artist do the art, have a writer do the writing, a musician do the music. Pretty obvious stuff today, but back then it was not really like that. And I was struggling to find a business model to support that. And it took me a while to do that, which was a combination of me changing business models and growth of the business changing. Well, then as it came around to sort of the beginning of 2002, 2003, it had sort of changed so much that you only had these huge companies, basically. And then as we went into 2005, 2006, the smaller developer was getting less and less, but then you had developers making money on iOS or on Steam, and then eventually the Android, but those again were kind of typically small teams. So here I was going, how do I do the same thing all over again? How do I have a team of you know, in this case 20 people, which is not a large company, but for a developer it's fairly large. How do I make that work again? Boom, here we have Kickstarter and crowdfunding, and now I have a company and I'm kind of back full circle doing that same thing. And so for me, that was sort of my arc of kind of working my way through the different cycles. Anyway, that's kind of how that worked out. I don't see the AAA ones going away. And in fact, you know what'll happen is some smaller group like myself will make a game that sells 10 million copies, and all of a sudden it will be the AAA, right? And so now what are we talking about anymore? So there'll always be hits. I mean, that's just, there's no entertainment business on the planet that doesn't have hits. So that's inevitable, and it's continue to happen. It's just that let's spread the money around a little more evenly. I think that with a lot of people that get into different businesses, you start off with me. I first start off as a player, and I was playing games when I was I don't know, 17, 18 years old. The old SSI games, the old Sierra, or what were they? Sierra. They weren't called Sierra back then. Sierra Online. I think they're just called Online. I forget. They changed their name. I forget. But I used to be just a player, and so you finally get to a point you go, I think I can do better. I think I could do something here. I wanted to do better, and I started my little one-man company, Saber Software, and I did an adventure game, and it was the classical. I did the programming, I did all the diskette duplication myself, I stuffed all the baggies, I shipped them out the door, I did the whole thing. I did that when I was about 18 years old. I just basically wanted to do it. And then some Stanford graduates had basically said, hey, we think this computer software stuff looks interesting. We want to start a company. Buy your company out and we'll make you vice president. I did that for about a year, but I was the passionate guy about it, and I was doing all the development and everything else. And I finally decided, you know what, I need to just branch off and do this myself. And that was in '83, October '83 is when I started Interplay. I was 20 years old. And it was just a matter of, you know, not knowing what odds were against you, and it was just doing it and just picking yourself up off the ground day after day, you know, failure after failure. You know, things go sideways left and right all day. You know, you deal with bad news more than you deal with good, and I just kept charging along. And then it was really, we did our first entertainment contract with Activision, with Mind Shadow, which was a graphic adventure game based upon, it was sort of like based loosely on the Bourne Identity, old Robert Ludlum Amnesiac novels, and then really got put on the map in '85 when we did Bard's Tale, and that really kind of gave me the ability to start to capitalize on some success and change the company. I do come at it from a player perspective, but I also have a marketing hat on, which is, I think, is where is there an opportunity in the marketplace too? You know, I may love Angry Birds, okay, but I'm not going to do another game where I'm slinging birds at a slingshots, right? People don't want another one. No matter how much I might love it, I'm not going to make one like that, you know. So you have to think about where is there an opportunity in the marketplace, and that's part of what I try to do. And Blizzard, by the way, has done a wonderful job of that. They'll take a look. I mean, you look at, like, we all loved Dune. It was one of the first real-time strategy games. And they looked at Dune and said, how about a medieval version of Dune? And Warcraft was born. So you have to have a marketing hat savvy on, then you have to execute well within that. So that's number one. And I think some people, they forget that step. You can't just be creative. You've got to think of the market you're going into. People, it would be hard pressed, no matter how good a job you did right now, to do another military shooter, right? It's been filled. People don't necessarily want another one. Even if you could do a better one, it's probably not the best use of your time. Why battle that uphill? So think about what it is that you think there's an opportunity, and at the same time, what you're good at, what you can do. That's the other part of it. I happen to know role-playing, because I grew up playing role-playing games, Dungeons and Dragons, or comic books, movies. All my tastes sort of lined up for doing this kind of thing. You know, there's whole categories of products, fight games, right?
This is the path of my destiny.
I couldn't make a fight game of my life dependent on it, because I didn't play that many of them. So you really got to know what it is that you can excel at. So as far as then you have, quote, now you have the idea, which is just a blank piece of paper. I always start off with, what's the vision of it? So start very basic. What are the key pillars that you want to get across in this product? And then I start proving that I can do examples of each, right? So I'll pick a simplistic one. If you think, you know what, guys, we're going to do a funny game. Well, let me see an example. Well, if all the humor that comes back isn't funny, then we probably can't make a funny game. And so, you know, if we talk about the graphics being important, or particle effects, or big effect, what if we think that's a tenet of the game, then we need to prove to ourselves we can do those things. And so I always focus again on the vision document, what needs to be done. And then at that point, you know, the success for making the game is all of the day-to-day decision making that you make. You have to make good judgment calls day in and day out and day in and day out, and that's very much a reflection on your historical base of knowledge for what you've done before. You know, it's difficult to impossible to make a game if you don't have a great sense of history of what's been done before. Otherwise, you think you're inventing something super clever and innovative, but it's been done 100 times before. And I often give advice to it, like, if you're going to get into the business, know a category cold. Whether it's role-playing games, MMOs, a real-time strategy game, turn-based strategy game, whatever it is, know that category ice cold so that you could speak to everything that's been done on every other side. Only then can you even have the conversation how you can improve upon that. And so, you know, ours is not an industry where you typically don't have history and go, I have a game idea, I think I'll go pitch it to someone. You know, they do. You hear these stories in the film business all the time. Somebody has an idea for a movie, they pick it up, they get $100 grand, and everybody's happy. That doesn't happen here. You know, not really, because ours is more about the execution. It's like the book business, right? You would never go to a publisher and say, I have an idea for a book, find an author. You know, it's not going to happen. It's your ability to write that book. And so the same thing with our business. It's not the idea, but it's the implementation of those ideas. And of course, this has changed radically now with open source, or the openness to the crowd. Back in the 90s, or not even that long, not that long ago at all, you sort of had to make a game and then do kind of one of these. Did it feel right? You'd have your QA department, but they were paid employees, so you never know if you're getting the best feedback. But now we have this beta testing and ability to talk with the fans, and if you're utilizing that correctly, it's really powerful. And so that gives me more confidence now than in my ability to hone something and then deliver it than it has before, especially if you're in a position where you're not. Some people say, yeah, we're going to listen to them, but we don't have enough money to make the changes they're going to request, or I don't have enough time, whatever the case. So it makes it even worse, right? Don't ask a question you can't deal with the answer. So that, to me, is the most powerful new part of it, and something that we embrace in a big way, and it is a great, great change to being able to make something that's going to be successfully received. Oh, there can be no question that the audience is going to be shaping things more. They're going to shape both the product, and they're going to shape the business practices of the publishers and what they do. And as fragmentation continues, you're getting smaller but more passionate audiences of things. And I think that's a fundamental shift. And you're seeing a lot of this in the television business, for example. There are shows like Community. It's not high up the Nielsen charts, but they keep getting renewed year after year. And now with Arrested Development, they didn't make it, but now Netflix is financing them because there was a passionate group of people there. And you look at HBO, Showtime, those are smart shows, whether it's a Game of Thrones to Newsroom to Dexter. They're not made for ABC and CBS, but they're made for a specific audience, and they deliver on those in a big way. And I think that further fragmentation is going to be the same kinds of things that happen in the game side. When we're making games, we often talk about the 100 things that it does well. And I always ask the question, what's the one thing that we're doing badly that could kill us? Because you could be doing a brilliant product, but then you didn't do multiplayer in a universe where they're all multiplayer. Or it's running at 15 frames a second, right? There could be one thing about it that ruins the entire experience. And it's not that I'm thinking negatively, but I'm making sure that we don't hit those landmines. So when I boot up a new game, if something rubs me the wrong way right away, they've got a problem. And so I look to make sure that the totality of the experience just feels right. The music's coming in right, the dialogue is sounding right. I'm not hitting typos in the first 5 minutes. It feels right, the frame rate is right. It's just the whole presentation has to resonate with care. And you can always feel it. It's just like good graphics. You could show somebody who's not in the industry good graphics and bad graphics. They can tell the difference. They can't tell you why. They might not say, well, look at the shadows are completely off, or there's too many light sources, or whatever the issues are with the bad one, or it's crude. They just know the good from the bad. And I think that people as a group can always tell quality. They can feel it in their bones. And to me, it's because of that initial experience that you can just feel and you get a sense of things. And it's like a film. You get first 10, 15 minutes in a film, you pretty much decide whether you liked it or not. And we know that same to be true in the game. You really got to hone everything in. And typically speaking, if you can make that first 15, 20 minutes really feel right, then you have no reason on earth you can't make the rest of it feel right too. Well, certainly as a developer, the most difficult thing is to remain objective, is to look at your own stuff. And I purposely go in and remove myself constantly from things, because when you're a developer, you can see something and your initial reaction might be, that doesn't look good. But if you look at it 10 more times, it'll start to look good. And so you have to be very on point. But if I see that doesn't look good, I write it down immediately, because I know I will get used to it if it's borderline okay. I'll get a sense of things when I play the product. I'll see things in pieces. I have a good sense of I'm reacting negatively to that, but I'm reacting really positively to that. Let's do more of that and less of that. But then you got to get it in, because this whole thing is until it's up and running and you can feel it, you never know what you're going to have. I tell this on my guys all the time, especially on the role-playing games, is that I would rather have a 100-page design that I reiterated on for 6 months than a 1,000-page design that I reiterated on for 1 month. Because there's no amount of pre-production in the world that makes up for the iteration cycle. And you've got to have enough time on that, because you've got to feel it. And so as long as I have enough time to feel it and make the changes to it, then I can create those kind of moments where you feel good when you first turn it on. Well, my biggest hopes is that this whole ability to finance and have this direct relationship with fans continues and grows stronger. I think it gets people more of the product they want. It opens up a better line of communication, and it allows me and my guys to continue what we're doing for decades to come. That is my biggest hopes. People have more integrity than companies, faceless corporations. And so it's a very personal process. So we're not going to do things. We're going to be careful with our brands. We're going to be careful about our messaging. We'll be careful about not putting in things that the gamers hate. Day one DLC on disc, right? We're not going to let that happen, and that's because it's that personal relationship. If you're a nameless, faceless corporation, you could churn out sequels every 9 months, and who cares? There's no human being that cares. It's taking the heat. And so I think that part of the process, that is my hope, that this continues to empower more people like ourselves, smaller developers. And the fear is that it goes back, to the way it has been, which has been frustrating for many people. I definitely think games are more artistic than scientific. If they were scientific, you could reproduce the results on a regular basis and get what you wanted. But even the best of minds and the most experienced of this business have created things that haven't sold. So I just don't see it as science, and especially because there's this human element of, we always put things into games where, how is it perceived, right? And we'll do things where, we were just talking about a thing today where we've got all this great depth, but if we present too much at once, it becomes overwhelming, and is the player spending too much time clicking when they shouldn't be? But on the other hand, it's great that we have the depth, and so we have these big discussions about perception and the way the player / the human mind is going to parse all this data. That's not a scientific argument. That's a thinking about how people are going to react to information. And so I see that part of it as art. And the same thing, we get to music, what sounds good, what looks good. I just think we hit all the different disciplines. I think the argument, are games art or not, I think it's ridiculous to say they're not art. The question should be, are they important? And I don't know that we've achieved that yet. In terms of, like, I went and saw the movie Lincoln, right? And you walk out of there and you've learned a little bit about our history and how we got there and how close it was to get that amendment passed, and who Abraham Lincoln was as a man. And you walk out of there feeling sort of elevated that you saw something that was important for me to know. I don't know if we're there yet with games where it's important. You see a Schindler's List, that's a different thing. Or people have gone to see movies about silver linings and about depression or bipolar, and it's helped them either with their own plight in life or understanding a relative. Like, it had like some real change in their outlook of life and of other human beings, and those are important to me. And so I don't know if we're there yet, and I'm sure there's some anecdotal story of somebody, but as a group, there are so many films that I've seen that to me are very important. There's certainly sort of a throwback attitude about video games, and people don't understand what is all there. I mean, there are great games that have taught people a lot about history or have helped them through college or through tough times. And so I think to say that they are a waste of time or too violent, we're just like any other industry, that we have these rating systems in place, and there's going to be something for everybody. So to me, that's like picking a Tarantino film and saying all movies are violent. It makes no sense. There's so many other films, just don't go see it. But I understand that that does come up, and that there is a sort of reaction that, like, my audience, for example, is on average about 40 years old. Now, I'll often go to these same cocktail party, and the soccer mom will say, "Oh my gosh, you're making video games." I said, "Guess how old you think my average audience is?" Now, inevitably, they have a kid that plays, right? And they say 12, and I say, "No, 40." And they go, so they don't really understand that part of it, because there is a large group of kids that also play games. But now that's become sport. I mean, how good you are in Call of Duty, you could go out for basketball or be a Call of Duty player, so it also gives kids another outlet for some of them who are not as athletic as other ones. And it's the way they congregate with friends now. You go in at night, my kid, he's got Skype on, he's got all 4 of his friends there, and it's like his virtual friends are all there. They're all doing this community stuff together. So, I see just, wonderfully good things coming out of all of it. I guess a couple pieces of advice is that one is you just got to jump in and do it. It's so much easier to create prototypes in games now than it was 10 years ago because of all the tools, things like Unity and that sort of thing. So there's no excuse not to jump in. In fact, my kid's 14 years old, all his friends, they got graphics up on screen, they're doing it, jump in and make it happen. Now, I'd also say, but crowdsourcing, that's not the place to cut your teeth. because you're opening yourself up to the public in a way. So if you're going to try to take their money and make something, you really need to deliver, because if you come back 10 years later, they're going to remember you. The internet never forgets. And so I think that if you're a budding developer, you got to get in and get something on screen that people can see. It's the ultimate resume. And it's like the same way, like if we were going to hire an artist around here, who am I going to hire? The guy I can see his work, or the guy that just sends me a resume of words on a piece of paper? It's going to be the body of your work. So I think that you have to show what you can do. Get in, the tools are available, and make something and show it off. So we did a game at Interplay called Sacrifice, and it was a real-time strategy game. I absolutely loved the game. I mean, forget that we made it. It had nothing to do with us making it. I just played the game. In fact, it was made at a division of ours, so I wasn't even close to it all, but I immediately fell in love with it, and I became really good at it. So anyway, I would be out killing time, and gosh, I don't know how many hours I put into this thing. But so online one night, there was a contest that some gamers put together. You had to play a particular map in a 2 versus 2 player game, and the winner won a mouse pad, you know. So anyway, so I'm anonymous, of course, nobody knows who I'm out there. I enter the thing, I win the tournament, so I won my own mouse pad. It's hilarious. So I mean, I'm just competitive. I didn't want the mouse pad, but I wanted to win that damn tournament, you know. So that was kind of funny. I don't know where the time frame is, whether it's 20 years or certainly I think by 50 years. You know, you think of something like the Oculus headset, and I used that recently, and for me, that kind of stuff, unfortunately, it makes me a little bit nauseous, right? But that's just a matter of technology catching up and frame rate catching up. But when I wore that headset, I took the mouse and I ran over to the side of the cliff as if I was going to go off of it, and I had that physical reaction. If you've ever been to the Grand Canyon, you get too close and you get this feeling inside of you. I got that wearing that headset. That was very powerful. And so I think about when I can start strapping on a headset and I can look around a room like I'm looking around this room right now, and it looks real and it's updating and fast enough such that I don't feel nauseous. That's unbelievably powerful, more so than you can even hardly comprehend. And I think that is going to change things radically when we've accomplished that sort of immersion with a headset. Well, I guess my answer would be how do you not love video games? I can't imagine that it's such a deep experience. How could you not get into it? And it's like anything. It's like you just got to find the one. I mean, I guarantee if anybody spent a little bit of time, they would find one that really appealed to them. But it's just a matter of kind of getting there. We love escape. I mean, I don't know. Don't human beings love to escape? You know, whether it's a movie, I get lost in movies, I get lost in books, and I get lost in games. And there's very few things where I'm up at 2 o'clock in the morning. Just don't want to go to bed. I mean, it's rare that a book does that for me, but a game, you're just lost in that world and you're fighting your way through, and you've forgotten where your hands are. You're not even thinking about your hands and the controller anymore. You're just in that world and you're moving around, you're turning left, right, fire, and whatever you're doing, you are doing it's just flowing naturally from you sitting at that thing and being at one with the game. So I think there's no more powerful medium in that regard. Well, I think that, I guess I haven't put a lot of thought into it, but it seems to me that, you know, human beings were always bonded by common interests. And so whether I've met you in real life or virtually, or over a chat room, you know, we're bonding over a common interest. So I think a lot of these kids are going to grow up and think back to their times of playing games and when they would do all this stuff, and they would move on like normal adults like the rest of us have. You know, I had a different set of bonding things back then. It might have been my collecting of comic books. I used to do sports and I'd have my sports friends. So, you know, we all had different interests that bonded us with other people. This is just another one.